My sister Ava stole my identity and buried me under $84,600 in debt. My parents said, "Just forgive her, she's family." I filed a police report. At her arraignment, they came to testify against me until the judge asked one question that made my mother stop crying and start shaking. The letter came from Summit Federal Bank. That is the detail I still remember first. Not the amount, not the account number, not even the moment my stomach dropped hard enough that I had to put one hand against the kitchen counter. The logo. A bank I had never used. I stood in my apartment holding the envelope with my name and address printed cleanly across the front, the way official things always look calm right before they ruin your life. I almost threw it away. I thought it was another credit offer, another mailer trying to sell me a card I did not need and would not apply for because I had spent 10 years teaching myself that wanting something was not the same as being able to afford it. But something made me open it. Late payment notice. Current balance, $19,280. Minimum payment due, $415. Account status, 51 days delinquent. My name at the top. My address. An account number I had never seen before. I read it 3 times, standing under the kitchen light in the apartment I had protected with every careful choice I had ever made. Cheap furniture, old laptop, used car, no vacations I could not pay for in cash, no missed payments, no shortcuts. And now this letter said I was 51 days late on a card I had never opened. I called the number on the notice at 7:12 p.m. The woman who answered sounded tired but professional. She asked me to verify my identity, full legal name, date of birth, last 4 digits of my social security number. Then she read back my information with the ordinary rhythm of someone who did not know she was holding a match near gasoline. "Is that correct, sir?" "Yes," I said, "but I didn't open this account." There was a pause. Not long. Long enough. "I'm going to place a fraud flag on this profile," she said, "but I need you to understand something." My hand tightened around the phone. "I see 2 additional credit cards connected to this social security number. Would you like me to pull those as well?" The kitchen went silent around me. "Yes," I said. My voice did not sound like mine. By the end of that phone call, I owed $84,600 I had never spent. The first card was Summit Federal. The second was a travel rewards card opened through a bank in Illinois. The third was a retail financing account tied to a furniture store I had never walked into. The woman on the line kept saying fraud profile and provisional dispute and investigation window, words that sounded structured enough to belong to someone else's life. Mine had become very simple. 3 accounts. My social security number. My name. My credit. My future suddenly attached to charges I did not recognize and a debt large enough to change the shape of everything I had built. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not because I chose to. There was no dramatic decision. My legs just stopped participating in the conversation. The tile was cold through my jeans. The phone was still in my hand. The late notice lay beside me with the torn envelope folded under it, like some polite official disaster. I wrote the 3 account numbers on the back of that envelope because it was the only paper within reach. My handwriting looked wrong. Too tight. Too careful. I stayed there for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. Time gets strange when your own name has been used against you. Then I stood up. I called the first fraud department. Then the second. Then the third. By midnight, I understood one thing clearly. Someone had not borrowed from me. Someone had become me. The next afternoon, the second fraud department emailed me copies of the original application packet. I opened the PDF at my kitchen table. There are moments when your brain tries to protect you by slowing everything down. The cursor moved across the screen. The file loaded line by line. My name appeared first, then my social security number, then my date of birth, my current address, and an old apartment address I had not used in 3 years. Then I saw the handwriting. The room did not spin. Nothing that dramatic happened. It got sharper. Every line on that form looked like a voice I had known since childhood. The rounded capital D. The narrow way she wrote the lowercase a. The pressure marks where the pen had paused too long before moving forward. And then the sevens. Ava crossed her sevens. She had done it since high school after an art teacher told her it looked European. She kept doing it because Ava liked small things that made her feel different from everyone else. Every 7 on that application had a line through it. The apartment number. The date. The income field she had invented for me. I sat there staring at my sister's handwriting inside a crime committed with my name. Until that moment, some stupid part of me had still been hoping for a bank error, a stranger, a data breach, anything impersonal enough to survive. But this was not a mistake. Ava had not stolen from a system. She had stolen from me. Let me tell you about Ava first. Because this story does not make sense if you think my sister simply made a mistake. People like Ava do not arrive at identity theft by accident. They arrive there through years of soft landings, cleaned up consequences, bills paid by other people, explanations provided before anyone asks, and a family system built around the idea that accountability would damage her more than her choices damaged anyone else. My name is Daniel Serrano. I am 32 years old. I work as a litigation paralegal and case coordinator at a mid-sized civil litigation firm in Indianapolis. It is not glamorous work, but it is exact work. Deadlines, filings, discovery responses, medical records, deposition summaries, exhibits. The kind of work where being almost right can still cost someone a case. I got there the slow way. Community college first, then night classes while working days, then a clerk position nobody else wanted because the pay was bad and the hours were worse. I took it anyway because it put me near the kind of work I wanted to do. I learned how to build a case by watching people who had spent 20 years learning how people lie when paperwork starts closing around them. That becomes useful later. My parents, Victor and Marisol Serrano, would tell you they love both their children equally. They would say it sincerely. That is the most dangerous kind of lie in a family, the one people believe about themselves. The truth is that I was raised to be capable, and Ava was raised to be rescued. I was the oldest son, which meant responsibility arrived early and stayed. If money was tight, I understood. If plans changed, I adjusted. If Ava needed something, I was expected to be patient because she was younger, sensitive, going through a phase, figuring herself out. Ava has been figuring herself out since she was 16. She is 29 now. She dropped out of 2 programs, quit or lost more jobs than I can count without checking old conversations, moved back in with my parents 3 times, and borrowed money with the confidence of someone who understood that repayment was mostly a ceremonial concept. My father called it helping her get back on her feet. My mother called it supporting family. I called it what it was in my head and kept my mouth shut because men in my family were not supposed to sound bitter. We were supposed to be useful. Ava was not stupid. That matters. She was charming when charm worked, fragile when fragility worked, angry when anger got her more room. She knew exactly which version of herself each person wanted to see and handed it to them before they could ask. To my parents, she was the daughter who needed protection. To me, she was the weather system I had been told to stop complaining about. So when I saw her handwriting on those credit applications, the shock was not that Ava had crossed a line. It was that she had finally crossed one my parents could not quietly erase without asking me to disappear too. My credit score was 784 when the letter arrived. I want you to understand what that number meant. Not because I was proud in some shallow way, not because I thought a number made me better than anyone, but because that score represented 10 years of making choices nobody clapped for. It meant paying bills before buying anything unnecessary. It meant driving a used Honda with a cracked center console because the engine still worked and vanity was expensive. It meant keeping the same phone for 5 years. It meant saying no to trips, no to new furniture, no to the kind of small comforts people call normal when they have someone behind them to catch the fall. I did not have that. I had rent, student loans, car insurance, groceries, and the knowledge that if I missed one step, nobody in my family was going to call it a hard season and make it disappear. That credit score was not just financial. It was proof that I had built a safety net with my own hands. Ava knew the number. She had asked about it one Sunday afternoon while my parents were grilling in the backyard. Casual voice, harmless face. "What's your credit score now, Danny? You're always so careful with that stuff." I told her. 784. She laughed and said, "Must be nice being that responsible." I thought she was teasing me. I did not know she was collecting inventory. My score, my birthday, old addresses, the way banks trusted my name more than they had ever trusted hers. I had spent 10 years building the door. My sister was learning how to pick the lock. The priority mail envelope arrived 2 days later. 3 credit applications. Not summaries. Not customer service notes. The original forms. I sat at my kitchen table with the pages spread in front of me and read my own life written by someone else. Daniel Mateo Serrano. My social security number. My date of birth. My current apartment. Then the old address from 2 moves ago, the one I had given Ava once when she said she wanted to send me a birthday card and then forgot my birthday anyway. Each application had the same structure, same false income, same employer information pulled close enough to truth to survive a lazy verification, same phone number that was not mine, and the same handwriting. Ava wrote like she wanted the page to notice her. Rounded letters, hard pressure at the start of words, a narrow little hook on the capital S. But the thing that made my body go cold was the number 7. She crossed her 7s. Always had. In grocery lists she left on my parents' fridge. In birthday cards with hearts over the eyes when she wanted something. In the old notes she used to tape to my bedroom door when we were kids and she wanted me to drive her somewhere before she had a license. Ava had picked up the habit from a high school art teacher who told her it looked European. She kept it because Ava liked anything that made ordinary things feel curated. Every 7 on those forms had that slash. The apartment number. The income field. The date. The fake balance transfer amount. I stared at those crossed 7s longer than I stared at my social security number. That is what people do not understand about family betrayal. Sometimes the proof is not dramatic. It is not a confession or a recorded call. Sometimes it is a tiny line through a number. A habit you recognize because you grew up beside it. I did not need a document examiner to tell me whose hand filled out those forms. But I knew I was going to need one anyway. The statements covered 16 months. That was the part that made it impossible to pretend this was panic. Panic is one charge, maybe 2. Panic is groceries, gas, a utility bill, something ugly and immediate that still does not excuse fraud, but at least tells you what kind of desperation you are looking at. Ava did not panic. Ava shopped. The first card showed 2 designer handbags purchased 6 weeks apart. One in Chicago, one online with expedited shipping to an address I did not recognize yet. A sectional sofa financed through the retail account. A 75-inch television. A MacBook. an iPad, AirPods. Things I had walked past in stores while telling myself mine still worked. The second card was worse because it told a story. Hotel stays in Nashville, Chicago, Miami, and Scottsdale. Restaurant charges I would have noticed on my own card because I notice everything. Spa services, boutique clothing, ride shares at 2 in the morning, airport bars, weekend escapes posted online like acts of self-care. I opened Ava's social media and matched dates. Nashville, needed to breathe. Chicago, finally choosing myself. Miami, a mirror selfie in a hotel bathroom with marble counters and a caption about healing. Scottsdale, a pool chair, sunglasses, and the words "no bad energy." All of it sat on statements under my name. Then there were the cash advances. 4 of them. ATMs around Indianapolis, totaling $13,700. That number bothered me differently than the handbags. Cash meant she knew. Cash meant she understood the cards were not really hers, that the money had to be pulled out before anyone could ask too many questions. Every page made the same argument. Ava had spent 16 months living inside my clean credit. Not borrowing it. Not accidentally crossing a line. Living there. And every charge carried the same quiet assumption. When the bill came due, it would not come for her first. I called Ava at 6:18 that evening. She answered on the 4th ring with music in the background and the loose, irritated tone she used when someone interrupted a version of herself she was enjoying. "What?" "I need to see you in person," I said. "About what?" "In person." There was a pause. Ava did not like not knowing the shape of a room before she entered it. "I'm at Mom and Dad's," she said finally. "I know." I did not tell her why I was coming. I did not accuse her over the phone. I had spent enough years near litigation to understand that people reveal more when they think they still have time to choose a performance. I put the applications, statements, account numbers, and highlighted charges into a folder and drove across town. My parents' house looked the same from the street. Porch light on, curtains open, my father's old pickup in the driveway. The kind of ordinary scene that makes betrayal feel more insulting because the world refuses to mark the moment properly. When I walked in, they were already in the living room. My parents sat side by side on the couch. Ava sat in the armchair across from them, knees tucked under her, one hand around a mug she was not drinking from. No one looked surprised. That told me more than anything they could have said. The triangle had already been formed. My mother patted the cushion beside her like I was still a boy who could be managed into sitting where she wanted me. I stayed standing. Then I took the folder out of my bag. Ava started crying before I finished opening the folder. That is how I knew she had already told them something. Not the truth. Something shaped like the truth from far away. Something soft around the edges where her choices should have been. "Danny," my mother said, and there was warning in my name. I laid the first application on the coffee table. Then the second. Then the third. These were opened under my name, I said. My social security number, my date of birth, my old address, $84,600 in debt. Ava covered her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders shook. My mother moved immediately, not toward me, toward her. She put one hand on Ava's knee and said she was desperate. For words. No question. No shock. No, are you okay? No, what happened to your credit? No, how much of this can ruin your life? Just she was desperate, as if desperation turned identity theft into a family inconvenience. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You have a good job," he said. "You know how these things work. You can recover." I looked at him. "I can recover?" You're stable, he said. You're a man. You have your career. Ava doesn't have what you have. The room tightened around that sentence. Because there it was. The old family math. My stability was not something I had built. It was something they could spend. My discipline was not protection. It was proof I could absorb more damage. She used my identity for 16 months, I said. I could lose my apartment. My credit is destroyed. My firm does background checks. I could be sued by banks for money I never touched. Ava made a broken sound. My mother rubbed her knee harder. She didn't mean for it to get this bad. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because get this bad was the kind of phrase people use when they want the ending to sound accidental. I looked at my sister. Her eyes were wet, but behind the tears was calculation. She was watching the room work the way it had always worked. And she knew it was working. My mother looked at me like I was the one making the room ugly. Just forgive her, Daniel, she said. She's family. There it was. The sentence every selfish person eventually borrows from someone's idea of love. Family. A word that had been handed to me my entire life like a bill with my name already printed on it. Family meant I should understand when Ava needed more attention. Family meant I should not make things harder when she quit another job. Family meant I should help her move back home, loan her money, stay quiet when she did not repay it, smile through birthdays where my accomplishments were mentioned once and her disasters took up the whole table. Family meant I was the son, the older brother, the stable one. The one who could take a hit. The one who would recover. I looked at my mother. She stole my identity. She made a terrible mistake. For 16 months. She was scared. She spent $84,600 under my name. My father's jaw tightened. Lower your voice. I had not raised it. That was the part that almost made me lose control. Not the debt. Not Ava crying. Not even my mother's hand still resting on Ava's knee like she was the injured one. It was my father telling me to manage my tone while my future sat in a folder on the coffee table. Something inside me cracked then. Small. Structural. The kind of crack you do not hear from the outside, but after it happens the building is never carrying weight the same way again. I looked at Ava. Then at my parents. No, I said. Not this time. I gave Ava one chance. Not because she deserved it. Because I needed to know, before I crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, whether there was any part of my sister that understood what she had done without needing a badge to explain it to her. She can go to the banks herself, I said. My mother blinked. Ava stopped crying just enough to listen. She can confess to the fraud, identify every account, and agree to a repayment plan. If she does that, I will cooperate with the fraud departments on a civil resolution. My father leaned back. You're threatening her. No, I said. I'm giving her the only version of this that does not start with police. Ava wiped under one eye with the back of her hand. For a second, I thought she might understand the size of the door I had opened. Then she said, no. One word. Small. Certain. Protected. She said it because she had looked around the room and done the math. My mother beside her. My father in front of me. 32 years of family pattern behind her. She thought the room would save her. I put the papers back into the folder. The next morning, I called all 3 fraud departments and told them I was filing a police report. Detective Mara Holt had been with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department Financial Crimes Unit for 15 years. You could tell before she said it. Some people carry experience like decoration. Detective Holt carried it like weight she had learned how to stand under. I met her at 9:20 on a Monday morning in a room with beige walls, fluorescent lights, and a table that had seen more ruined lives than anyone had bothered to count. I put my folder down. Applications, statements, account numbers, fraud notices, screenshots of Ava's social media posts matched against hotel charges and cash advances, notes from the confrontation at my parents' house, written while the words were still fresh enough to hurt accurately. Detective Holt opened the folder and started reading. She did not gasp. She did not say what people say when they want to sound comforting and end up making you feel like a spectacle. She read. That was the first thing I liked about her. After 10 minutes, she looked up. You know the suspect? My sister. Her pen stopped for half a second, then kept moving. Has she been made aware you were coming here? I thought about my mother's hand on Ava's knee, my father telling me I could recover, Ava saying no with the confidence of someone who believed the room would keep protecting her. Yes, I said. I confronted her Saturday. My parents were present. Detective Holt's expression changed slightly. Not surprise. Calculation. Then we need to move quickly, she said. Family fraud cases get messy fast. Documents disappear. Phones get replaced. People suddenly remember things differently. I understood that sentence more than I wanted to. She asked for every address tied to Ava, every job she had claimed, any storage units, known relationships, old mail access, shared devices, prior borrowing. I answered what I could and wrote down what I needed to find. Then she tapped the applications. You identified the handwriting as hers. Yes. Personal identification helps, but we'll need more than that if this goes forward. I brought samples, I said. For the first time, Detective Holt looked almost impressed. I reached into my bag and took out 3 birthday cards from Ava. I figured you would. The birthday cards were in a shoebox at the top of my closet. I had almost thrown them away twice. The first time was during a move, when I was trying to become the kind of person who did not keep sentimental clutter. The second was after Ava borrowed $400 and then posted brunch photos 2 days later. Both times, I kept them. Not because they meant much. Because some part of me had always understood that family history is still history, even when it disappoints you. There were 3 cards. One from my 24th birthday, one from my 28th, one from the year I turned 30, and Ava wrote, "You've always been the responsible one," which looked different now than it had then. Detective Holt sent them to a forensic document examiner named Isaiah Okoye. 12 years in the division. Careful reputation. The kind of man, she told me, who would not give an opinion stronger than the evidence allowed. His report came 6 days later. I read it at my desk during lunch with my office door half closed. Known writing samples were compared against questioned writing on 3 credit applications. Similarities were observed in letter formation, spacing, pressure patterns, numeral construction, and repeated stylized formation of the number 7. The conclusion was professional and dry. That made it hit harder. In the examiner's opinion, the handwriting on the credit applications was produced by the same hand as the birthday cards. The same hand. Not my suspicion. Not my brother's anger. Not some family fight Ava could cry around. A trained examiner had looked at the forms and said what I already knew. My sister had written my name into debt. I sat there for a while with the report open on my screen. Then I saved 3 copies. Caroline Pierce knew before most people did. She was my supervising attorney at the firm, 24 years in civil litigation, and one of the few people I had ever met who could make silence feel like a legal instruction. I told her after the first late notice, before I knew it was Ava, before the handwriting, before the birthday cards became evidence. I had asked for 10 minutes at the end of the day. Caroline closed her office door, sat behind her desk, and listened while I explained the bank letter, the fraud flags, the 3 accounts, and the number that had started sitting on my chest like a weight. $84,600. When I finished, she did not tell me everything would be fine. Good attorneys do not lie that early. Instead, she took off her glasses and said, "Daniel, document everything." I nodded. "I mean everything," she said. "Every call, every voicemail, every text, dates, times, exact language when you remember it. Back it up somewhere your family cannot access." At the time, I thought she was being careful. Later, I understood she was being kind in the only way that mattered. I started a running document that night. Bank calls, fraud department reference numbers, my conversation with Ava, my mother saying she was desperate, my father saying I could recover, Ava's refusal to confess. Every date went in, every time, every sentence I could remember without polishing it into something cleaner than it had been. Then the family messages started. My mother texted first. "Please think about what this will do to your sister." My father left a voicemail. "You know Ava can't survive something like this. Is that what you want?" Ava sent nothing. Not one apology. Not one explanation. Not one sentence asking what $84,600 in stolen debt had done to my life. Nobody asked if I was sleeping. Nobody asked if my apartment was safe. Nobody asked if my job was at risk. Every message was about what I was doing to the family. So I documented that too. Detective Holt called 3 weeks after I filed the report. I was in the copy room at the firm, standing beside a printer that had jammed on page 42 of a medical records packet. "We have enough," she said. 2 words. Clean. Heavy. What happens now? "We'll be making the arrest tomorrow morning." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not because I regretted it. Because knowing something is necessary does not make it painless. Ava was arrested on a Thursday. I know because my mother called me at 9:43 a.m. I let it ring twice before answering, already understanding from the time of day that this was not going to be a call about me. "They took her," my mother said. Her voice was shaking. "They took your sister in handcuffs." I said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say. Because every answer available to me felt too honest for a mother who had not called once to ask whether I was sleeping. "How could you do this?" she asked. There it was. Not how could she. How could you? I looked at the copier, the half-printed pages, the life I was still trying to keep functioning around the wreckage Ava had made. "I'll see you at the arraignment," I said. Then I hung up. I went to the arraignment alone. I want you to understand what that means, because alone is not always about the number of people in a room. The courtroom was not empty. There were attorneys moving through files, defendants whispering to relatives, deputies standing near the doors, people waiting for their names to be called with the exhausted posture of lives interrupted by procedure. But I was alone. I had my folder on my lap. Inside were copies of the credit applications, the statements, Detective Holt's report, Isaiah Okoye's handwriting analysis, and the running document Caroline Pierce had told me to keep. I had organized everything twice the night before because organizing paper was easier than admitting my hands were shaking. Caroline had met with me the previous afternoon in her office. She explained what arraignment was and what it was not. Bond, conditions, next dates. The defense might make noise. The prosecutor would keep the focus narrow. I was not there to argue with anyone. I was there because victims have a right to be present, and because disappearing would only make their version easier to sell. Then she looked at me over her glasses. "Daniel, do not react." "I know. I mean it. Not to Ava. Not to her lawyer. Not to your parents if they show up. I had nodded. Then she said the part one already knew and had been trying not to know. Prepare yourself. They may choose her side in the room. I thought I had prepared. I had not. I sat on the prosecution's side, 3 rows back, with an empty chair to my right. That chair became its own kind of evidence. It was where my mother should have sat, where my father should have sat, where someone should have been angry on my behalf instead of frightened for what accountability might do to Ava. I looked straight ahead and kept my breathing even. Ava had stolen my name, but the harder thing to sit with in that moment was that my parents had already taken something else. They had taken the last childish part of me that still expected them to turn toward the person bleeding instead of the person holding the knife. At 10:08, the courtroom doors opened behind me. I did not turn around immediately. I already knew. Some betrayals have footsteps before they have faces. My parents walked in dressed like church. That was the first thing I noticed. My mother wore the dark green dress she saved for funerals, baptisms, and occasions where she wanted people to understand she was taking something seriously. My father wore a gray blazer I had seen maybe 5 times in my life, including my community college graduation, where he had spent most of the ceremony checking his watch because Ava had a headache at home. They looked composed. That hurt more than if they had looked frantic. Frantic would have meant conflict. Composed meant decision. They came through the courtroom doors side by side, my mother holding a tissue already folded in her hand, my father scanning the room like he was looking for the correct place to stand in a story he had rehearsed. I sat 3 rows back on the prosecution's side. There was an empty chair beside me. They saw it. They saw me. My mother's eyes touched mine for less than a second. Not with guilt. Not with apology. With assessment. The look of a woman checking whether the person she had decided to sacrifice understood his role yet. Then she looked away. They walked past me. No pause. No hand on my shoulder. No whisper of my name. Nothing a stranger in that room would have recognized as parenthood. They crossed the aisle and sat behind Ava. My sister turned when she heard them. For the first time since I had arrived, her face softened into something close to relief. My mother leaned forward and touched Ava's shoulder. My father sat rigid beside her, eyes fixed ahead, jaw set in the way men look when they have mistaken stubbornness for morality. I kept my hands on the folder. Caroline Pierce had told me not to react. So I did not. But inside me, something very old and very tired finally stopped reaching for them. I had spent my whole life thinking my parents failed to see me clearly. That morning, I understood something worse. They saw me clearly enough. They just chose where to sit. Ava's attorney was Jeffrey Larkin. Private defense, expensive suit, calm voice. The kind of man who had clearly walked into that courtroom believing this was a family fraud case that could be softened into a misunderstanding if everyone used the right words. He stood when Ava's case was called. "Your Honor," he said, "this matter arises from a deeply complicated family dynamic." There it was. The first move. Make the crime sound emotional. He said Ava was devastated. He said she had no prior record. He said she had been under financial and psychological stress. Then he turned slightly, not enough to point at me, but enough that the room knew where he wanted attention to go. He said I had previously allowed Ava access to personal information. He said siblings often share documents, passwords, addresses, records, and family resources without formal boundaries. He said this case had been escalated because of a personal conflict, not because of criminal intent. Escalated. That word landed hard. As if I had taken a small family disagreement and dragged it into court because I was angry. As if 3 credit applications, $84,600 in debt, cross sevens, cash advances, hotel charges, and my social security number on documents I never signed were just the messy edges of sibling tension. Jeffrey Larkin was trying to make me sound vindictive without saying the word too early. I kept my face still. Across the aisle, Ava looked down at her hands. Behind her, my mother dabbed at her eyes. My father stared forward like a man waiting for his cue. And I understood then that this was their plan. Not to prove Ava did not do it. To prove I was wrong for refusing to absorb it. Then my father raised his hand. I want to be precise about that gesture because I still see it sometimes when I am trying to fall asleep. He raised it like a man in a meeting asking permission to clarify a misunderstanding. Formal, controlled, certain that his voice belonged in the room. Judge Helena Ward looked at him over the bench. "You are Victor Serrano," he said, "the defendant's father. And you wish to address the court?" "Yes, Your Honor." Ava's attorney did not stop him. That told me he knew this was coming. My father stood. I kept my hands flat on the folder in my lap. Caroline Pierce had warned me not to react, and for the first time I understood how hard that instruction could become when the person speaking against you was the man who taught you how to ride a bike. "Your Honor," my father said, "Daniel has always had issues with his sister." The courtroom seemed to narrow. "He has always been jealous of the attention Ava received. Madison." He caught himself. "Ava has made poor choices, yes. But this is a family matter. My son is using the legal system to punish her because he has resentment he never dealt with." My mother nodded behind him. Soft crying. Careful crying. The kind with tissue pressed under the eyes instead of over the face, so the room could still see the grief. My father continued. "Daniel is successful. He is stable. He has a good career. He could have handled this privately. Instead, he chose to destroy his sister and humiliate this family." Destroy. That was the word he chose for the man whose name had been stolen. I looked at Ava. She would not look back. Then I looked at my father. I did not hate him in that moment. That came later, in smaller pieces. In that moment, I finally understood him. He was not confused. He was choosing the version of the family where my damage was acceptable because it was quieter. Judge Ward did not react to my father the way he expected. That was the first sign something had shifted. My father had spoken like a man delivering context. Like if he could wrap Ava's fraud in enough family history, the courtroom might forget that my name was on 3 credit applications I had never signed. Judge Ward looked at him for several seconds. Not angrily. That would have been easier to survive. She looked at him with the focused patience of someone who had heard a statement and found the seam in it. "Mr. Serrano," she said, "before we proceed, I have a question." My father straightened. "Yes, Your Honor." The room became quiet in a different way. Courtrooms are always quiet on the surface, but this was not procedural quiet. This was the kind that happens when people understand, all at once, that a door has opened somewhere they did not expect. Judge Ward looked from my father to my mother. "Did either of you know that Ava was using Daniel's identity before the police report was filed?" No one moved. Not Ava. Not Jeffrey Larkin. Not the prosecutor. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother stopped crying. That is the detail I remember most. The tissue stayed in her hand. Her face was still arranged for sympathy, but the tears stopped like someone had shut off water at the valve. Then her hand rose to her mouth. Not in grief. In prevention. Judge Ward's voice stayed level. I asked a clear question. Since both of you have voluntarily addressed this court, I will remind you that statements made here are subject to the same standards of honesty that govern any proceeding. My father looked at my mother. That was the wrong move. Everyone saw it. Ava turned in her chair. For the first time since she had walked in wearing victimhood like a borrowed coat, she looked genuinely scared. Not of me. Of them. Because until that moment, Ava had believed my parents were a wall between her and consequences. Now the wall was being asked whether it had helped hide the door. My mother's shoulders began to shake. Not the soft courtroom crying from before. This was smaller. Quieter. Real. Judge Ward waited. So did the room. And for the first time in my life, my parents were trapped somewhere family language could not rescue them. My father tried to answer like minimization was still available. That was his first mistake. He looked at Judge Ward, then at my mother, then at the floor between his shoes. We knew she had opened a card or two, he said. A card or two. The phrase moved through the courtroom differently than he intended. He had meant it to shrink the thing, to make $84,600 sound like a misunderstanding with interest charges, to turn identity theft into youthful confusion, even though Ava was 29 and had been living inside my credit for 16 months. Judge Ward repeated it. A card or two. Not as a question. As a record. My father's face changed. Only slightly, but I saw it because I had spent my life studying his face for signs of whether the room was safe. It was not safe for him anymore. ADA Marcus Bell stood slowly from the prosecution table. Your Honor, given that statement, the state requests that today's testimony be preserved in full. We may need to evaluate whether there was prior knowledge, concealment, or interference with the fraud investigation. Jeffrey Larkin's confidence disappeared in pieces. First his mouth tightened. Then he looked at Ava. Then he looked at my parents like they had just handed him a box he had not known was wired. My mother whispered, Victor. One word. Not warning enough. Too late for warning. Ava turned all the way around in her seat. She looked at my parents with an expression I had never seen on her before. Real fear. Not the soft, useful kind she performed when she needed protection. This was smaller, younger. The look of someone realizing the people who had always covered for her had just become evidence. Judge Ward looked at my father. Mr. Serrano, I strongly suggest you say nothing further without counsel. My father closed his mouth. For once, he obeyed. I sat still with my folder in my lap. I did not feel satisfaction. I thought I would. What I felt was exhaustion. The truth had finally entered the room, and somehow it was heavier than the lie. The proceeding ended after that. Judge Ward set the next date. ADA Marcus Bell requested a transcript preservation order. Jeffrey Larkin gathered his papers with the tight efficiency of a man who needed to stop his client's family from helping any further. Ava did not look at me when the deputy led her away. My parents did. That was new. In the hallway outside the courtroom, everything looked too ordinary for what had just happened. Gray floor, fluorescent lights, a vending machine humming against the wall, people walking past with folders, coffee, court notices, lives breaking in public under institutional lighting. I was halfway to the elevator when my mother grabbed my arm. Her hand was cold. Not cool. Cold. Daniel, please, she said. The performance was gone now. No soft tears. No courtroom tissue. No controlled trembling designed to make strangers think she was a mother suffering through something unfair. This was the real version. Smaller. Frightened. Angry underneath the fear. You don't understand what this will do to us, she said. Us. Even then. Even after the debt, the report, the arrest, the hearing, my father's testimony, and the judge's question, she still could not locate me inside the damage. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. For most of my life, that hand had meant obligation. Come here. Calm down. Help your sister. Don't make this worse. Be the son we can count on. Be the brother who absorbs the impact. I pulled my arm free. Not hard. Just enough. Enough to make the point my whole life had avoided making. No, Mom, I said. You don't understand what you already did to me. Her face changed. I did not wait to see what came after. I did not explain the credit score, the sleepless nights, the bank calls, the way my own name had started feeling unsafe in my mouth. I did not beg her to understand why $84,600 was not a family misunderstanding. Evidence had already done enough talking. I walked to the elevator alone. This time, alone felt cleaner. 6 months later, Ava took a plea deal. I was not in the room when she signed it. I did not need to be. By then, I had learned that needing to witness consequences is still a kind of attachment, and I was trying to recover from every kind. ADA Marcus Bell called me that afternoon. Restitution. A repayment schedule over 7 years. 3 years of probation. Mandatory financial counseling. I sat at my desk while he explained the terms in the careful voice prosecutors use when they know legal outcomes rarely feel equal to personal damage. Do you believe she'll pay it? I asked. There was a pause. I believe the order gives you legal recourse if she defaults. That was an answer without pretending to be comfort. I appreciated it. 7 years is a long time to wait for money someone stole in 16 months. And I knew Ava well enough to know repayment would become another stage where she performed hardship, another place where the world would be asked to admire her struggle with consequences she created. But this time, paper existed. A court order existed. If she failed, it would not be my word against her tears. It would be a violation. My parents were not charged. People expect that part of the story to feel like failure, and some days it did. ADA Marcus Bell called me 2 weeks after Ava's plea was entered. He said the state had reviewed the courtroom transcript, my documentation, and the timeline around what my parents knew before I filed the report. Prior knowledge was there. That was not the problem. The problem was the legal threshold. Knowing something happened is not always the same as concealment. Minimizing it is not always obstruction. Protecting the person who committed it, morally disgusting as that may be, does not automatically become a charge the state can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I knew that. I had worked around litigation long enough to understand the gap between what is true and what is provable. It still felt like swallowing glass. My father had admitted they knew about a card or two. My mother had sat behind Ava and cried for a courtroom before shaking under one honest question. They had tried to make me the villain for refusing to disappear under debt. And legally, they walked away. Justice, I have learned, is not a clean door that opens at the end. It is a hallway. Sometimes you get restitution. Sometimes you get a record. Sometimes you only get the truth written down where no one can pretend it was never said. My credit score is 681 now. That number would have embarrassed me once. Now I look at it differently. It is not where I was. It is not where I should be. It is not the clean 784 I built over 10 years of paying every bill before buying anything I wanted. But it is movement. That matters when someone has used your name like a crowbar. Rebuilding credit is not dramatic. It does not give you a courtroom moment or a clean final line. It is phone calls, dispute letters, fraud affidavits, certified mail, calendar reminders, and logging into accounts you hate looking at because every screen reminds you that repair takes longer than damage. The banks began discharging the fraudulent balances once Detective Holt's report and Isaiah Okoye's handwriting analysis were added to the files. Some moved faster than others. Institutions love documentation because it lets them protect themselves while pretending they are protecting you. I accepted the cooperation anyway. At work, Caroline Pierce gave me more responsibility. Not as charity. She would have offended both of us if she had tried that. She handed me larger case files, more direct client contact, and a complex discovery project that would have terrified me a year earlier. When I asked why, she looked at me over her glasses. "You handled pressure correctly," she said. "That matters here." I sat with that for a long time. Because Ava had not just stolen credit. She had stolen sleep. Safety. The simple confidence of believing that my own name belonged to me. I am rebuilding all of it now. Slowly. Precisely. One documented step at a time. I have not spoken to my parents since the arraignment. They have called. My mother left 2 voicemails. My father left 1. I listened to all 3 because some part of me still believed information mattered, even when the source had already failed the basic test of love. They were not apologies. That is important. An apology begins with what the person did. Their messages began with what my absence was doing to them. Your mother isn't sleeping. This has gone on long enough. We need to heal as a family. Ava is still your sister. Not once did either of them say, "We knew and we still chose her." Not once did they say, "We helped make you look cruel for refusing to carry debt that was never yours." Not once did they say my name in the same sentence as the word harm. So I did not call back. No contact sounds dramatic until you understand how quiet it actually is. It is not slamming doors. It is not revenge. It is not lying awake, composing speeches you will never deliver. It is looking at your phone, seeing the name, and allowing it to ring. It is choosing not to walk back into a room where your pain is only acknowledged when it becomes inconvenient for someone else. I started therapy in April. Dr. Nia Caldwell specializes in family estrangement and financial trauma, which sounded too specific until I sat across from her and realized my problem had never been only money. Ava stole my identity. My parents tried to steal the meaning of it. Dr. Caldwell asked me what role I had played in my family before all this. I said, "The one who could take it." She wrote that down. Then she asked, "And what role do you want now?" I thought about the courtroom, my mother's cold hand, the folder in my lap, my name on accounts I never opened. "None," I said. For the first time, that felt like an answer instead of a loss. The credit cards are being discharged through the fraud resolution process. That sentence sounds clean. It is not. It is certified mail, follow-up calls, uploaded reports, case numbers, fraud affidavits, and waiting on hold while a stranger checks whether the theft of your identity has been documented thoroughly enough for their system to believe you. But the detective report exists. The handwriting analysis exists. The applications, the crossed sevens, the statements, the timeline, the courtroom transcript, all of it exists. That matters. Banks cooperate more readily when liability has nowhere to hide. My apartment is still mine. My job is still mine. My credit is recovering. My name feels less dangerous to say out loud. I do not have a neat ending for my family. Ava is on probation. My parents are somewhere on the other side of a silence they helped build. Maybe they call it stubbornness. Maybe they call it grief. I do not need to correct them anymore. The truth does not require an audience. It requires documentation. And for the first time in my life, I am not the one carrying everyone else's consequences back into the house and calling it love.